The barren moon of Quillara lay under a sky of swirling violet clouds, its jagged terrain bathed in the pale glow of distant twin suns. For most travelers, this place was nothing more than a forgotten wasteland, an abandoned relic of the once glorious Graxian Empire. But for Dr. Elias Rowan, it was a destination laced with whispers and tragedy. The rumors had reached him through the trade routes, passed along by smugglers and exiled nobles. A princess had been cast away here, left to perish not because of treason or weakness, but because of something far crueler: imperfection. King Raylon, the ruler of Graxia, was known for his obsession with aesthetics, for the belief that strength lay in beauty. His daughter, Princess Leora, had once been the Empire's radiant jewel, until she was not. The assassination attempt had not taken her life, but it had taken something else. The scars that marred her once pristine skin had been enough to erase her from history, her existence struck from royal records. The court had fallen silent on the matter, and the people had learned not to speak of the lost princess. But Elias had never been one to turn away from a patient in need. His ship, the Nightingale, settled on the outskirts of the ruined palace that loomed in the distance. It was a place forgotten by time, its grand stone towers cracked and hollow, its banners faded and torn by the wind. What had once been a beacon of royal splendor had become nothing more than a crumbling mausoleum. Elias stepped out onto the uneven ground, his boots crunching over dried leaves and shattered stone. The air was thick with silence, heavy with the weight of neglect. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but from a terrible knowing. She was here. Somewhere inside these ruins, she was alive. With his medical bag slung over his shoulder, Elias entered the palace's darkened corridors, the shadows stretching long against the cracked marble. The deeper he went, the more he felt the presence of something lingering, not just abandonment, but resilience. And then he saw her. She was seated in what had once been a throne room, though the throne itself had long since crumbled. Wrapped in tattered robes, she sat against a broken column, her figure still and composed. Her face was hidden beneath the dim light, but her golden eyes gleamed in the darkness, sharp and wary. She had heard his footsteps, yet she did not move. Elias took a slow step forward, his voice steady. "Princess Leora." A beat of silence. Then, her voice, low and quiet, but not broken. "You are not one of them." Elias exhaled. "No." She finally lifted her chin, letting the light expose her features. The scars that traced her skin were deep, crossing over her cheek and jaw, vanishing beneath the fabric of her cloak. They did nothing to diminish the intensity of her gaze, the undeniable strength behind her golden eyes. "If you've come to finish what the assassins started," she said evenly, "you're wasting your time." Elias felt something twist in his chest. She truly believed she had been left to die. "I didn't come to kill you," he said. "I came to help." For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Not trust, not hope, but something far more dangerous. Caution. Because no one had ever come to help her before. Leora did not protest as Elias knelt beside her, but she did not welcome him either. She watched his every movement with the wariness of a wounded predator, her fingers twitching beneath her tattered cloak. Elias retrieved a small medical scanner, running it over her form, noting the signs of malnutrition, old injuries left untreated, and fresh wounds along her arms. Despite the harsh environment of Quillara, she had survived on her own for far longer than anyone had likely expected. "You're dehydrated," he murmured, pulling a small hydration vial from his bag. "Drink this." Leora eyed it suspiciously. "Why?" Elias sighed. "Because if I wanted to poison you, I wouldn't have landed my ship in broad daylight." A moment passed. Then, finally, she took the vial, her fingers brushing against his. Her skin was cold, too cold. She drank in slow, measured sips, never breaking eye contact. Elias continued scanning her injuries, his brows furrowing at the deeper lacerations. "You were attacked recently," he noted. Leora's lips curled slightly, though there was no humor in it. "The creatures of this moon do not care for royal blood." Elias retrieved a sterile bandage, carefully applying it to one of the deeper wounds on her forearm. He expected her to flinch, to pull away, but she didn't. She simply watched him, studying him like a puzzle she had yet to solve. After a moment, she spoke again. "Who sent you?" "No one," Elias replied, wrapping the bandage with practiced ease. Her gaze narrowed. "Then why are you here?" Elias met her eyes. "Because no one else came. The air between them stilled. Leora's fingers tightened around the empty vial, and for a brief second, Elias saw something raw in her expression, something dangerously close to disbelief. "You think I need saving?" she asked, voice sharper now. Elias didn't hesitate. "No, I think you need someone to give a damn." The silence stretched again, but this time, Leora looked away first. For all her strength, for all her fire, she had no answer to that. Elias packed up his supplies, standing slowly. "You can stay here and rot in a palace of ghosts," he said, "or you can let me help you get out of here." Leora scoffed, leaning back against the cracked column. "And then what?" Elias smiled just slightly. "Then," he said, "we figure it out." He turned to leave, giving her the choice to follow, and after a long pause, she did. The nightingale hummed softly in the distance, its sleek form a stark contrast against the ruinous remains of the once majestic palace. Leora followed Elias in silence, her steps careful yet purposeful, as though each one carried a weight she could not yet define. The night winds of Quilara whispered through the broken halls behind them, a reminder of how long she had been alone here. Too long. She had memorized every crack in the stone, every fallen pillar, every echo of what had once been a throne room where she was meant to rule. Now she left it behind, and for the first time in years, she was not sure if she should. Elias walked ahead, his pace steady but unhurried, giving her the space to decide for herself. He did not turn back to see if she followed. He did not need to. He had already known she would. "How long have you been on this moon?" he finally asked, his voice quiet against the howling wind. Leora exhaled, pulling her tattered cloak closer around her. "Does it matter?" Elias glanced at her. "It does if you still think like an exile." She scoffed, but there was no real bite in it. "I stopped thinking like an exile a long time ago." He didn't challenge her words, but she knew he didn't believe them. The scars across her skin, the hollowness in her voice, the way she carried herself like someone who had long since abandoned hope, they spoke for her. And yet here she was, walking toward the unknown with a man she had met only hours ago. The sight of the nightingale sent something unfamiliar twisting in her chest. It was freedom, wasn't it? The ability to step into the stars, to leave behind the place that had been both her prison and her grave. But something else coiled beneath it. Fear. Leora had dreamed of escape before, back when she was younger, before the weight of abandonment settled too deeply into her bones. But now that it was within reach, it terrified her. "What happens when I leave?" she asked abruptly, stopping just short of the ship's ramp. Elias turned, his expression unreadable. "What do you want to happen?" Leora hesitated. She did not know. For years she had been defined by what she lost, what she was no longer, what her father had discarded. What did it mean to be something else, to be more? Elias didn't rush her. He simply stood there, waiting, allowing the choice to be hers alone. Leora took a slow breath. Then she stepped onto the ramp, and the past, the ruin, the abandonment, Quilara itself, fell behind her. The interior of the Nightingale was small but well-maintained, the walls lined with medical equipment and navigation displays. It smelled of sterile metal and worn leather, a contrast to the dry earthen scent of the moon she had known for so long. Leora stood in the center of the cabin, taking it in, feeling strangely out of place in a space meant for the living. Elias moved around her with practiced ease, stowing away his supplies and activating the ship's controls. He barely acknowledged her as he worked, as if she were just another patient he had picked up along the way. It should have bothered her. It didn't. It had been a long time since someone had looked at her and not seen a ruined princess. "Sit," Elias said, motioning toward the medical table near the cockpit. "I need to do a full scan of your injuries before we leave the system." Leora hesitated before complying, lowering herself onto the examination bed with slow, deliberate movements. It wasn't pain that made her hesitate, it was trust. Elias powered on his medical scanner, his fingers deftly moving over the controls. "Any internal damage I should know about? Organ failure? Neural disruptions?" She shook her head. "No, just what you see." Elias glanced at her. "That's not always the worst of it." She said nothing. The scanner whirred to life, passing over her body, collecting data on old fractures, muscle deterioration, deep tissue scarring, the markings of survival. "You've been fighting to stay alive," he murmured, reading the results. "Even when no one was coming for you." Leora exhaled, something bitter curling around her chest. I didn't fight because I thought someone would come. She met his gaze. I fought because dying would have been too easy. Elias didn't look away. There was no pity in his eyes, no sorrow, just understanding. Then you deserve better than this, he said simply, shutting off the scanner. Better than being a ghost in a ruined palace, waiting for the world to forget you. Leora studied him. No one had ever told her that before. You act like I have a choice, she murmured. Elias arched a brow. You do. She scoffed. And what would you have me do? Reclaim a throne that my father burned to ash? Pretend the empire would welcome me back with open arms? Elias leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. No, I'd have you figure out who you are outside of what they took from you. Silence. Leora looked away first, because it was easier. Elias exhaled. I'm heading to the nearest trade station. You can decide what you want from there. If you want me to drop you somewhere safe, I will. If you want to fight for something more, I'll help you. His words settled over her, pressing against the walls she had spent years building around herself. You don't even know me, she said. Elias smirked slightly. I know enough, she frowned. And what do you think you know? He met her gaze without hesitation. I know you aren't broken, he said. Leora felt something crack deep inside her. Not pain, not sorrow, something else, something dangerous. Hope. The Nightingale sliced through the cold darkness of space, its engines humming steadily as Elias set a course for Haven's Reach, a neutral trade station on the outskirts of the Terran-Graxian borders. It was a place where no empire ruled, a station built by wanderers and traders, where those without a home could find temporary shelter. Leora sat in the co-pilot's seat, her golden eyes fixed on the endless void beyond the viewport. She had never seen space like this before, not from the bridge of a royal cruiser, not from the limited view of a forgotten moon. For so long, she had existed within the ruins of her exile, believing herself to be trapped in a life already decided for her. Now, the stars stretched before her. Elias glanced at her from the pilot's seat, noting the way her fingers curled against the edge of the console. Not what you expected? She shook her head, her voice quieter than usual. I never expected to leave Quellara at all. His hands moved over the controls, adjusting their approach trajectory. Then what did you expect? Leora exhaled. The truth was something she had not spoken aloud before, not even to herself. She had expected to fade, to vanish into the dust and silence of that palace, swallowed by time until the galaxy forgot she had ever existed. I didn't let myself expect anything, she admitted finally. It was easier that way. Elias didn't argue, didn't press her further. He simply nodded as if he understood. And somehow, that was worse. The comm panel crackled, interrupting the moment. Nightingale, this is Haven Control. You're clear for docking in Bay 6. Keep your weapons holstered and your business clean. Elias smirked slightly. They always make it sound so welcoming. Leora studied the station growing larger in the viewport. Its structure was chaotic but functional, a patchwork of human and alien designs, a reflection of the worlds that had built it. The moment the ship touched down, she felt the shift in herself. She was stepping into a world that did not know her name, a world that would see her scars before it saw anything else. For the first time, she would have to decide if that mattered. The docking bay was bustling with life, filled with mechanics, traders, and mercenaries moving between ships, exchanging goods and quiet threats in equal measure. The moment Leora stepped down the ramp, she felt their gazes flicker toward her. Quick, assessing, and full of silent questions. She kept her chin level, her shoulders squared. Let them look. She had been seen before. Elias walked beside her, relaxed but alert, leading her toward the central hub of the station. He had no doubt the rumors had already begun. A scarred Graxian woman traveling with a Terran medic? People would assume, people would talk. Leora had been raised in a court where eyes followed her every move, where whispers could build or shatter empires. She knew how to ignore them. But as they moved deeper into the station, she realized something unsettling. The court had watched her because she was meant to be perfect. These people watched her because she was not. She forced herself to keep walking. Elias, sensing her tension, spoke without looking at her. You don't owe them anything. Leora swallowed. I know. But the weight of their eyes did not lessen. She was no longer a forgotten exile. She was something else now, something the world did not yet know how to name, and that, she realized, was power. The trade hall of Haven's Reach was loud with the sounds of bargaining voices, the hiss of steam vents, the occasional crackle of an energy weapon being tested by a cautious buyer. This was a place where everything was for sale: supplies, information, alliances. Elias led Leora toward the medical supplies merchant, but even as they approached, he could tell she was still uneasy. She had not spoken since they entered the station. Elias didn't need to ask why. He could see it in the way she moved, how her steps were careful but rigid, how she carried herself like a woman who had been watched her whole life but had never been seen. She wasn't afraid, but she was waiting. Waiting for someone to say it. It came sooner than he had hoped. "You lost?" The voice belonged to a Graxian trader, his silver eyes gleaming as he leaned against a metal railing, a smirk tugging at his lips. He was older, rougher, the kind of man who had spent his life dealing in debts and favors. Leora's golden eyes flicked toward him, her expression unreadable. Elias recognized the look in the trader's eyes before he even spoke again. "Didn't think your kind let women like you out in public," the man mused, his gaze flickering over the ridges of her scars. "Didn't think they let them live." Leora did not flinch. Elias did not breathe. The silence stretched between them, thick with expectation. The trader was waiting for a reaction, waiting for her to shrink away, to prove his words right. Leora tilted her head slightly. "Funny," she said, her voice calm. "I was thinking the same about you." The man's smirk faltered. Elias exhaled slowly, watching the shift in the air. Leora did not turn away. She did not hide. She let him see her. The trader scoffed, pushing off the railing. "Careful where you walk, princess. Not all places are kind to things left behind." Leora smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Then they should learn to keep up." The trader hesitated, but something in her gaze made him leave first. Elias watched the man disappear into the crowd before turning back to Leora. She was still watching the space where the trader had stood, her hands clenched at her sides, her breath even. Elias said nothing for a moment. Then softly, "You didn't have to do that." Leora finally looked at him. "Yes, I did." And Elias understood. She had not come here to disappear. She had come here to be seen. The artificial lights of Haven's Reach flickered overhead as Leora and Elias moved through the corridors of the station. The encounter with the Graxian trader had passed, but the weight of it lingered. She could feel it in the air, in the way people's gazes flickered toward her before turning away. They were watching, calculating, wondering who she was and what she was doing in a place like this. She let them wonder. Elias led her toward the medical supplies sector, a sprawling marketplace where doctors, smugglers, and mercenaries alike came to trade for whatever healing technologies they could afford. He had business here, refilling his stocks, but Leora knew the real reason he had taken her with him. She needed to see this world, to understand that beyond the throne rooms and abandoned ruins, the galaxy was not waiting for her. She had to decide if she would take her place in it. The merchant they approached was a stocky human woman with cybernetic eyes and a voice like broken glass. She barely glanced up from her inventory logs as Elias placed his order, listing off medical supplies and stabilizers he would need for the next few weeks. Leora stood beside him, her presence unnoticed, until she spoke. "Do you have dermal regeneration packs?" The merchant looked up, blinking rapidly as her cybernetic implants adjusted to scan Leora's face. There was a flicker of something, recognition or perhaps just curiosity, before she leaned forward, elbows resting on the metal counter. "You need it for yourself?" The question was blunt, clinical, as if she had already assumed the answer. Leora met her gaze evenly. "Would it matter?" The merchant huffed a short laugh. "Most people who come here for that kind of tech don't walk around wearing their scars like a crown." Elias stiffened slightly beside her, but Leora remained still. It wasn't an insult, she realized. It was an observation spoken without malice. "I don't need to erase them," she said, "but I won't let them slow me down." The merchant studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "I respect that. Got a few packs in stock, top grade. You can take a look if you want." Leora nodded, stepping forward as the merchant pulled out a sleek black case and opened it. Inside were small, silver devices designed to stimulate dermal cell regeneration, accelerating healing without leaving scars behind. She could take them, could erase the reminders of what had been done to her. It would be so easy. She ran her fingers over one of the packs, feeling the smooth surface against her skin. Then she pulled her hand away. "I don't need them," she said simply. The merchant tilted her head, then shrugged. "Suit yourself." Elias paid for his supplies, and they turned to leave. But just before they stepped away, the merchant called out, "You've got Graxian blood, don't you?" Leora hesitated. She could have ignored the question, could have walked away without acknowledging it, but she had spent too long in silence. "I do," she answered. The merchant nodded, something unreadable in her expression. "Good luck, then. You'll need it." Leora didn't reply. She simply walked away, leaving behind the choice she had already made. She would not erase herself. She would not hide. The Nightingale was quiet as they prepared for departure, the hum of the ship's engines filling the silence between them. Elias moved through the cockpit, adjusting the coordinates for their next destination, while Leora sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the navigation screen without really seeing it. "You didn't take the dermal packs," Elias finally said. It wasn't a question. Leora exhaled, running a hand over the scarred skin of her wrist. "I thought about it, but you didn't." She looked at him then, something steady and unshaken in her gaze. "They remind me of what I survived." Elias nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. "Good." She tilted her head slightly. "You approve?" "It's not my choice," he said simply, "but I'd rather you live as yourself than as what someone else expects you to be." Leora looked away, but not before a small, fleeting smile crossed her lips. The moment was broken by the sharp beep of an incoming transmission. Elias frowned, tapping the console to bring up the message. A holographic symbol appeared, a royal seal, gilded and unmistakable. Leora stiffened. She knew that emblem, her father. Elias glanced at her. "Want me to ignore it?" She could have said yes. She could have turned away, let the past remain buried, but something inside her refused to back down. "Open it," she said. The screen flickered, and a transmission came through, not her father himself, but one of his emissaries, a stern-faced Graxian man in deep blue robes. His expression was unreadable as he spoke. "By order of His Majesty, King Raylon of Graxia, you are commanded to return to the capital immediately." His gaze shifted slightly, locking onto Leora through the screen. "Your presence is required before the throne." Leora didn't flinch. "And if I refuse?" The emissary's expression remained neutral. But there was something cold in his tone. "Then you will be declared an enemy of the Empire." Elias let out a slow breath, subtle. Leora stared at the screen, her pulse steady. She had spent so long believing she was nothing more than a discarded memory, a shadow of a legacy that no longer wanted her. Now, the Empire wanted her back. She didn't know why, but she knew one thing. If they expected her to return as the broken thing they had left behind, they would be disappointed. She leaned forward, her voice even. "Tell the king I accept his summons." The emissary nodded, the screen flickering to black. Elias turned to her, his brow raised. "That was fast." Leora exhaled, her hands steady against the controls. "I've spent my whole life being abandoned, Elias." She looked out at the vast darkness of space, her golden eyes burning. "I think it's time they see what that created." The royal palace of Graxia loomed over the capital city like a monolith of unshaken rule, its towering spires cutting through the storm-heavy sky. The banners of King Raylon still flew from its highest peaks, untouched by time or doubt. Nothing had changed since Leora had been cast from its halls. The empire had moved forward, and its people had long since learned to forget the daughter their king had abandoned. But now, as the Nightingale descended onto the royal landing platform, they would remember her. Elias powered down the ship, his gaze flicking toward her as she stood beside him. "Last chance to turn around," he said lightly, but there was no humor in his voice. Leora's golden eyes remained locked on the palace beyond the viewport. The scars that lined her skin were illuminated by the soft glow of the control panel, but she no longer felt the instinct to hide them. She exhaled slowly. "I am done running." Together, they stepped out into the cold air of the landing bay, where a line of armored guards awaited them. At their center stood the same royal emissary who had sent the message. His face remained impassive, though his eyes lingered too long on the jagged scars that marked her face. "Princess," he said stiffly. The king is waiting. Leora did not correct him. She was no one's princess. Elias walked beside her as they entered the grand halls of the palace, passing under golden chandeliers and between marble columns inscribed with Graxian history. The walls of this place had once been her home. Now they felt like the remnants of a past life she had shed. The throne room doors opened, revealing the man who had condemned her. King Raylon sat upon the gilded throne, his robes as pristine as the day he had exiled her, his gaze unreadable as he watched his daughter step forward. The court was gathered, dozens of noble figures lining the walls, their whispers barely contained. She felt their stares burn into her skin, the weight of their judgment pressing down. For the first time in years she stood before them. For the first time she did not bow. "You have returned," Raylon said, his voice carrying the same cold authority it always had. Leora did not blink. "You summoned me." The court murmured at her audacity, but she did not falter. She saw no warmth in her father's gaze, only calculation. He was not a man moved by guilt or regret. If he had called her back, it was not for sentiment. "You were exiled for a reason," Raylon continued, his voice unwavering. "Your presence weakens the image of this throne." Elias made a quiet sound beside her, one of disbelief, but he remained silent. This was her fight. Leora tilted her chin. "And yet, here I stand." The murmurs grew louder. Raylon's fingers curled slightly over the armrest of his throne. "I gave you mercy when I let you live. I will not make that mistake again." Leora's breath was steady. She had expected this. "I survived without your mercy," she said, her voice even. "Without your name, without this throne." She took another step forward, and for the first time, Raylon's mask of indifference cracked. "You cast me away because I was no longer the daughter you had shaped, because I was something you could no longer control." The air in the room was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Raylon's gaze darkened. "Then why have you come back?" Leora smiled, slow and unshaken. "Because you made a mistake." For the first time, she saw something flicker in her father's expression. Doubt. Because he knew. She was not the broken, forgotten exile he had abandoned. She was something else entirely. And he was afraid. The court watched in stunned silence as Leora moved forward, not as a fallen princess seeking redemption, but as a woman who had already reclaimed her power. "I have no interest in your throne," she said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "No interest in being your heir." Raylon narrowed his eyes. "Then why return?" Leora exhaled slowly, the weight of years spent in exile pressing against her, but it no longer held her down. "Because I wanted you to see what you created." She turned slightly, gesturing to her own scars, to the body he had deemed unworthy, to the woman who had risen from the ashes of his rejection. "You believed that by casting me out, you erased me, that no one would look upon me and see anything but a ruined thing." She let her golden eyes sweep over the nobles, over the men and women who had once looked away in shame. Now they could not look away at all. "I am not ruined," she said. "I am not forgotten." Her gaze locked onto Raylon's. "I am beyond you." The court erupted into whispers, shifting uneasily at the boldness of her words. Raylon's jaw tightened, his grip on the throne unyielding. For the first time, his authority felt fragile. Elias stepped forward then, standing beside her, silent but unwavering in his presence. He had never once tried to save her, because she had never needed saving. He had only reminded her of what she had always been. Raylon's expression remained unreadable, but Leora saw the truth in his silence. He could not deny her anymore. And he knew it. She exhaled slowly, then turned away from the throne. "I have nothing left to say to you." The doors opened before her, and this time she was the one who chose to leave. Elias followed without hesitation, but before they reached the corridor, the court's murmurs turned into something else. Applause. It started small, hesitant, but it grew. Not everyone, not all at once, but enough. Enough to tell her that they saw her now. Enough to tell her that the empire she had been abandoned by had never forgotten her at all. As they stepped into the open air of the capital city, Elias finally spoke. "So," he said, his voice lighter than it had been in days. "That went well." Leora smirked. "Could have been worse." Elias tilted his head. "Could have been better." She met his gaze, her golden eyes steady, unshaken, unbreakable. "No," she said, "it couldn't." And as they left the palace behind, stepping into a future of their own making, Leora realized something. She had spent years believing she had lost everything, but she had gained something far greater. She had found herself,